1918 was one of the bloodiest years of World War I. The British, French, and Germans suffered over 1.5 million casualties in the spring offensive. Those armies, plus the Americans, suffered almost 2 million casualties in the 100 Days Offensive. So what happened to all the wounded men who fell on the battlefield and could not crawl back to get help? The lucky ones were found by these heroes, the ambulance dogs of World War I. These dogs are briefly described in Chapter 34 of The History of the World in 50 Dogs. Dogs were trained to find wounded men on the battlefields after a firefight. They had to make their searches at night and alone. When they found a wounded soldier, they were trained not to bark, since that could draw enemy fire. Instead, they would pull a piece of the soldier's uniform off and bring it back to the handler, who would then leash them and dispatch a rescue attempt for the wounded soldier. They also carried medical packs they would leave with the soldiers so they could treat themselves. Some dogs even stayed with the dying soldiers until they passed to comfort them. Airedales and bloodhounds were best for this work. There were around 10,000 of these Red Cross dogs used during World War I, and they saved thousands of lives. The book War Dogs, Canines in Combat introduces the topic by describing a memorial to the animals who served. A striking monument resides at the Hartsdale Canine Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. It is simply dedicated to the war dog for services rendered during the World War, 1914 to 1918. Cast in bronze, the German Shepherd represented is more an animal of peace than an instrument of war. During World War I, Red Cross institutions of every country used many canines to aid and comfort the wounded men on the front lines. Soldiers squatted down in trenches, each side facing the other, and furious battles raged to gain just a few scant yards of real estate. Between the combatants lay no man's land, and it was here, often under the cloak of darkness, that many dogs worked and achieved their great successes. The 1915 book, Dogs of All Nations, describes why they were so effective at finding wounded men on the battlefield. The instinct of the wounded soldiers is to use their last strength in seeking protection from artillery fire, cavalry charges, the wheels of guns, and other horrors of which they are exposed. A dog's sense of scent and acute hearing enable him frequently to detect the sounds of the breathing of a wounded man when inaudible to the human ear. Moreover, a puff of wind often suffices to carry to the dog's nose the scent of a man lying possibly unconscious in some concealed place. It often happened that the wounded are found adjacent to some hedge or other cover not easy to search by human aid alone. They are differently equipped in the armies of different countries. The Germans provide their ambulance dogs with a saddle with pockets in which are bandages and dressings, while around the neck is a wooden flask of stimulant. British experts considered bandages and stimulant unnecessary, as every man has to carry his own first aid dressing. The dogs wear a very light saddle with a Geneva cross on each side, and a loud bell hangs from a leather collar. In some of the European armies, the ambulance dog is trained to return to their master and guide him to the wounded man. In others, he is taught to bark to give news of his discovery. The speediest method is for the dog to stay beside his quarry when found and bark until the ambulance arrives. But there is a drawback if several dogs bark simultaneously. It is not always easy to locate whence the barking comes. Slit trenches, barbed wire, and chemical gases were among the many obstacles faced by these dogs. Four-footed silhouettes searched no man's land quietly and efficiently in the dark for the wounded, with perhaps the flash of an artillery explosion illuminating the landscape. In one case, a French Red Cross dog named Captain located 30 wounded men in a single day. After a single battle, a French dog named Prosco located more than 100 wounded men. The dog dragged unconscious and wounded soldiers into protective craters and trenches before alerting his masters. As the war proceeds, in 1915, more and more use will be made of the special functions and gifts of the dogs, a resume of which, when peace again reigns, will surely prove one of the most interesting phases of the hostilities now taking place in Europe. Let's conclude with a quick look at the 2013 children's book, Darling, Mercy Dog of World War I. The story is written in first person from the dog's point of view, at about a 4th grade reading level, and the inside jacket says, Darling has a happy life, chasing sheep and begging for treats. But World War I is raging, and life is about to change for Darling, her family, and her country. When the British military asks for dogs to help the war effort, Darling's family sends her off to be trained as a mercy dog. Darling travels to Belgium with the 10th Battalion Worcestershire Regiment and helps locate injured soldiers on the battlefield, despite gunfire, poisonous gases, and other dangers. She is skilled at her job, but surrounded by danger. Will she ever make it back home to England? Get your copy at a local library, bookstore, or online bookstore and find out. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel for new videos every week or two, and see the description below for a list of books and online resources featured in this video.